What is going on, guys? It is Boy Nick here, back again with a brand new video today. If you guys saw my last two videos, you know that currently I'm sick right now, so I'm currently going to record this with webcam and mic because I don't have the energy to go shouting in front of the camera. I'm also going to be speaking a little bit quieter right now because currently it's kind of late and my family is sleeping, so I'm trying to keep it down a little bit. But anyways, going to be continuing my series in which I review every single Marvel Cinematic Universe film up to the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Today we're going to be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the fourth film in Phase 2. So Guardians of the Galaxy was directed by James Gunn, and whenever this movie came out, I actually remember there being a lot of skepticism and suspicion about whether or not this movie was going to be good. And yet this is pretty much the film that I feel like made James Gunn's the star director that he is right now. So whenever this movie came out, it was being advertised as a superhero movie, but also a comedy, but it also had a group of a whole bunch of people we had never seen before who all seemed like just weird people. So I remember a lot of people when Guardians of the Galaxy came out were not sure whether or not they were going to see that movie, or if they even wanted to see it, because Marvel had already done a great job when they had made Phase 1, and after all the hype and the success of the Avengers, and as well as the sequels that came out after the Avengers, like Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, and Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we had a whole new original idea with Guardians of the Galaxy, a whole bunch of characters that not many people really knew, even comic book fans. These are not characters that a lot of people were familiar with. Even people who read the comics only were familiar with the Guardians of the Galaxy if they ever actually read the Guardians of the Galaxy comics. And it's interesting to think that, this came out in 2014, and 8 years later, the Guardians of the Galaxy are iconic. It's actually hard to imagine the last 8 years without Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's because, they just did such a great job. I remember going and seeing this movie with my friend who lives next door to me, and him not being sure whether or not the movie was going to be good, and I just remember thinking to myself, well, Marvel's done such a great job with all the other stuff they've been putting out recently, I think Guardians of the Galaxy will be good. And it wasn't just good, it was great. So let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. So the first thing I want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy is the phenomenal cast. Every single person in this cast does a great job. We have, obviously, Chris Pratt, the star of the movie, as Star-Lord. He does a fantastic job. He is interesting because he's funny, but he's also not someone that you know whether or not you can trust at the beginning. But he also has a compelling and intriguing backstory that does make you feel some emotions for him. So he's an interesting main character for a movie. You don't know whether or not you can trust him or not when we first meet him. And Zoe Saldana is great as Gamora. Now she's interesting because you also don't know necessarily if you can trust her, but she also is not very trusting of a lot of other people either. And what I find so interesting about Gamora and Star-Lord is the on-screen chemistry between Pratt and Saldana, because their characters are totally the opposite in terms of their personalities. I feel like yet they have such great on-screen chemistry. They did so well on camera. The chemistry was not faked at all, and I feel like these two actors just did a great job on camera together. We also have some amazing voice acting from Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon. This is, in my opinion, some of the greatest motion capture as well as voice acting technology we've ever seen combined. I mean, good God, man, Bradley Cooper just knocked it out of the park with Rocket Raccoon, and they literally could not have found a better person to do Rocket Raccoon. They really could not have. Bradley Cooper nails all the comedy with him so well. He's funny, he's weird, but he's awesome. You can't help but love Rocket Raccoon, as bizarre as he may be, and Bradley Cooper just nails this kind of character. Vin Diesel also does some of the best voice acting I've ever seen as Groot, and Groot's awesome. You can't not love Groot. Groot's he's a big creature, but he's also a sweet soul, and you can't not love Groot. If you watch Guardians of the Galaxy and you think to yourself, I don't love Groot, you're basically lying to yourself, because I know everybody loves Groot. And the other thing about Groot and Rocket that's so interesting is that they have hilarious chemistry and banter together. They seem like total opposites of characters, but they're awesome. The walking tree and the talking raccoon are an awesome duo, and you can't not love them. Dave Bautista, I hope I'm saying that okay, or Dave Bautista, does a great job as Drax, and his character gets a little bit more less serious down the road, but so he's more serious in this one, but he's still pretty, he's funny enough, and he's interesting, and I kind of feel like his character becomes a little bit more likable and grows on you more as the rest of the movies went on. But still, this is a great introduction to Drax, in my opinion. I think Dave Bautista does a great job in this role because he's intimidating, but he's also funny. He's kind of like The Rock, so to speak, in a role kind of like this, and he does a great job. Michael Rooker also does a stellar job as Yondu. Yondu's interesting because he's kind of not really the villain of the story, because there's another villain, but he's kind of the anti-hero, anti-villain. I'm not sure what term to use exactly, but he's not someone that you don't know whether or not you can trust yet, but it's kind of interesting. I don't want to talk too much about it, because if you've seen the movie, you know, but yeah, Michael Rooker does a great job as Yondu, and I don't think they could have found a better actor to play Yondu. He just plays him so well. Karen Gillan is also great as Nebula. We don't see Nebula too much in this movie. We see her more as the films go on, but she does a great job, and I think that the interesting kind of rivalry between her and Gamora is a lot kind of like the Thor and Loki rivalry, because they clearly have like some sort of like feelings about each other in terms of like the way they were brought up, but they don't really know whether or not they can trust each other. That's just a really interesting thing to see, and these actors pull it off so well. And also more of a side character, but John C. Reilly is really funny as Corpseman Day, as I have written down. He's not in the movie too much, but he's very memorable and he's very funny, and I like seeing him in this movie. So, props to John C. Reilly for making a side character interesting. Of course, I can't talk about Guardians of the Galaxy without talking about the script. The script is witty, it's funny, it's got witty, funny dialogue, and like the banter between all these characters is just so fun to watch, because they're all characters of just like different backgrounds. They all seem like weird people, but it's really just like the things, or it's really just like the differences that make them whole, if you know what I mean. I feel like the witty banter and the jokes and the comedy and all that just hits with these characters so well. Like it makes them all feel like human, and it makes this group just a very entertaining group to watch. Like I love watching these characters on screen together. As I said, the cast has great chemistry. Like they really do feel like a group of friends, but with all just weird traits. And actually, what's interesting is that when they start off, they don't really start off as friends. They kind of like grow together, and I feel like the cast just really, I can't give the cast enough credit. They really did an amazing job casting this film. I think everyone was cast perfectly and did their role perfectly, and I just feel like these are probably people who are probably like good friends in real life, and I'm so glad to see, characters like these just be in a movie together, because like how often do you actually see a movie this well cast where every single person gets along and really appears as true friends? This movie also has very visually impressive CGI. I mean, you see CGI in like almost every, you see CGI in basically every Marvel movie, but I don't know, the CGI in this one I find very visually impressive. This is not the first Marvel movie to have space CGI, because we did see some of that in Thor as well as a little bit in the Avengers, but this is like the first story that like took place entirely in space. Just like the visuals for it and the CGI, like it looks great to look at. It's so good to look at. Like whenever I was watching it the other day, I was thinking to myself, this is an 8-year-old movie and it looks fantastic. Like the space CGI, breathtaking in my opinion. I really do think it looks fantastic in this movie. It's like it'll never not look convincing. I feel like this is one of those like timeless movies, kind of like Star Wars, where it's like it'll never not look convincing. Speaking of Star Wars, one thing I want to jump to real quick on my notes is that this is also one of the most original ideas for a superhero movie. I brought up Star Wars because if you really think about it, Guardians of the Galaxy is basically like Star Wars for Marvel, if you really think about it, because it's all about the characters. It takes place in space, but it also does its different things. It's not like a Star Wars ripoff, but it feels like the Marvel version of Star Wars, and I feel like that's why it's such a generation-defining movie. Because we didn't know any of these characters really whenever this movie came out or was announced, but we grew up loving them over the course of these last 8 years movies been out. Like we can't think of these last 8 years without Guardians of the Galaxy. It's really incredible how much of a cultural phenomenon this movie is. Of course, I can't talk about Guardians of the Galaxy without talking about the fantastic soundtrack with a whole bunch of great music from the 70s and the 80s. I don't know who decided to make the soundtrack for this movie in terms of like picking the songs and all that, but it fits with the characters and the feeling and the tone and all of it so well. Like there's like a lot of times I'll go and I'll hear these songs out in public, and the first thing I'll think of is Guardians of the Galaxy, because they really it's placed perfectly in the movie. And I feel like this is probably the best soundtrack in terms of like collections of songs that were not originally made for the movie, like of the decade. Guardians of the Galaxy is like, it's got the best soundtrack, man. Like I don't know what else to say about it. This movie is talking about how the visuals for space are so great. The visuals for the action sequences, like all the sci-fi action sequences, whether it's fights or it's like space battles or things with the ships, like it all looks so great. I'm so glad that this movie's aged as well as it did, because it's one of those movies that, like when it first came out, like it was really enjoyable, but for all we knew at the time, it could have aged really terribly, but it hasn't. It's aged so well, and I'm so happy to see the movie that I loved this much as a kid and still love it as much as I did when I was a kid as an adult. My only flaw with Guardians of the Galaxy, this is a fantastic movie, but I only really have one flaw with it, unfortunately, and that's that Ronan is kind of a weak villain. I mean, he's not bad, he's just not very interesting, but outside of Ronan not being a great villain, this whole film's fantastic. I really do mean that. That's like the one weakness this movie has in my opinion, the fact that Ronan's not a great villain, but like outside of, I can overlook that considering how great the rest of the movie is. And Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic superhero movie. It's one of the best Marvel movies. It's a superhero movie for the ages. I'm gonna love this movie for years on end. I don't think it's ever gonna get old. It hasn't gotten old for me. And over these last 8 years, I don't think it's gotten old for anybody, to be honest. With all that being said, I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy an overall rating of a 9.5 out of 10. It's so entertaining, and I'm going to give it an overall grade of an A. I wanted to give it an A+, but unfortunately I couldn't give it an A+, because of the one flaw I have with Ronan as a villain. Had Ronan been a better villain, I would have totally given this movie an A+, because this movie, it's so great. Like, I feel like there's not a single person on Earth who doesn't at least like something about Guardians of the Galaxy. I feel like it's got something for everyone. It's a defining movie of my generation, and I can't wait to see what future generations are going to think about it. So that was my review of Guardians of the Galaxy. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Make sure you tune into my channel in just a few days to watch my review of the next movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ant-Man. As editing Nick here, I realized I made a huge mistake when I said that the next review is going to be Ant-Man. The next review is actually going to be Avengers of Age of Ultron, then Ant-Man. My apologies there. This is a quick little edit I had to make. Hope you guys enjoyed the video today. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, leave a comment down below, and hit the notification bell so you get notified about my latest videos. And yeah, that's been it. Peace.